shows why they are so similar.
I don't think
I can't let him slap and run on the chimp human
we disagree with
similarity in DNA.
Do you disagree with the DNA similarity?
I yield to SFT.
Okay.
Well, no,
so you disagree with the chimp, like human similarity in DNA? You disagree with that completely?
Well, I don't disagree, because even the authors of the original chimp-human DNA similarity paper, they point out that instead of dealing with some, and I mentioned this to Dr. Garret in tonight's debate, but instead of dealing with some difficult questions regarding major portions of both chimp and human genomes, the researchers, what they did, and you can see this in the supplemental material too, they excluded all the large mismatch sections, which is actually over 1 billion letters. Oops. And so if you do a letter by letter comparison on the remaining, 2 billion letters, that did reveal 98% similarity, like you're talking about. Oh. Therefore, well, I'm not done yet. Therefore, we share 98 to 99% of our genetics with chimps, only if you ignore 18% and 25% of ours.
Wow.
So I kind of want to stalemate your position here, but do you think that phylogeny can always be inferred by whole genome, nucleotide by nucleotide similarity?
So ask that again.
Do you think that phylogeny should always be inferred by whole genome, nucleotide to nucleotide similarity?
Well, it's kind of ironic you're asking that question, given the fact that that's what evolution does, like evolutionary biologists do. So
not in the case of phylogenies, always.
Are you serious? In the context of how they're analyzing sequence similarities to determine heredity, you're telling me that is not based on differences in nucleotides?
It's not
like for example, with the chimp and humans, what they're doing is they're comparing roughly 2.2 billion letters. They acknowledge this of our actual total letters. And then the total amount of letters in the human and chimp genomes, as you know, is 3 billion. We get 3 billion from our mothers, 3 billion from our fathers. So they're looking at, in these genomic comparisons, what they're looking at, the particular type of DNA change they're looking at is single nucleotide polymorphism. And the fact is, and they admit this, there are entire chunks of DNA that are not found in either species. I talked about today in my opening that even the homology, even the shared sequences, they're expressed totally different between humans and chimps, which is exactly what we expect. So, so to break it down, if you include the single letter differences, the chunk differences, the big chunks that are missing in either case with the chimp and the human, you only get like 88, maybe 89% similarity. So yeah, what Mark there was saying, in that 88 or 89% similarity, you can find roughly 95 to 98% identity. But that's if you ignore.
Right. So the question I wanted to hit at, and it doesn't seem that it was conveyed properly, was if there is a reason that people can doing these phylogenetic analyses of genomes between chimps and humans are not including certain regions of the DNA. Number one, what is their justification? Because there are certain genome that are known to be.
I know what their justification. It's because they'll say, since the human and chimp split, say 6 million years ago, maybe 10 million years ago, depending on who you ask, obviously there's going to be independent changes. Therefore, there could be gene duplications. So where they find what appears to be a gene duplication, then they're just going to ignore that. So that's their justification.
Well, not just that. I was thinking more in the case of like short tandem repeats, where if you measure, if I'm recalling right, if you measure like the variance between like individuals, the variability between like one person to another is extremely high, actually, in the structure of those short tandem repeats.
Well, if we were to do the same type of comparison that you do with chimps and humans, every single human is 99.9% similar. That's including everything, But if you, with the chimp and the humans, then if you want to just ignore so much of the data, then my whole point is you can just get you can get your 98 to 99% identity.
Isn't the chimp like genome so much like larger than ours or something too?
Yeah,
12%.
10% larger as well.
Yeah.
And the Y chromosome is very different from ours.
Let's talk about the differences as well.
The big one that I brought up against Dr. Are you familiar with that one, Immutable Destiny, the Y chromosome being less than 70% similar between
I would need to see the source for it, but it sounds familiar.
Well, and genetically, isn't it true that like genetically we're closer to like gorillas than we are chimps? Yet morphology, like
that's not
gorillas
what
are
I've
closer to chimps.
Depends
Like,
how you compare it, yeah.
So.
Well, I
Depends
want
how
to
you
make
compare it.
the point that when it comes to nested hierarchical patterns, yeah, we are a lot more similar to the chimpanzee than we would be to the old world monkeys, to the new world monkeys, to fish. So there still is a nested hierarchical pattern. We still share more in terms of genetics with the chimp than any other form of life. I'm just pointing out the fact that when somebody says, you know, humans and chimps are 98 to 99% similar, I just like to point out that that's only based on the 2.2 billion letters, because they're ignoring a lot because they're assuming that there's been changes since the split. So if evolution is true, well, yeah, there would be some changes. So, but the point in question is human evolution. So we acknowledge those differences because we have the starting point that humans and chimps aren't related. Therefore, we can look at various lines of evidence like the Y chromosome. I can screen share it too, because the evolutionists themselves in this paper, they were very surprised.
If they're not related, then why are they so similar at all? And why is it that the closer you get to someone being your relative to, you know, being related to you, have a more and more similar gene sequence? Why is that, apart from this model that we've got in science? What is the model that explains that?
Mark, are you aware that they say that dogs and humans share 95% similarity? Are you going to tell me that because of that DNA similarity, we're a bit like dogs?
I don't think that's being made, although that's what you got away from it. That's fine.
I just want to point out. I want to point out a question that the fact is that humans and chimps, like other mammals, have similar cell physiologies. We have plenty of morphological similarities. Therefore, logically, whether creation or evolution is true, we're going to have a large number of genes that share high levels of similarity in their DNA sequence. That's why we have to look to what I call differentiating lines of evidence. That's why the Y chromosome and the mitochondrial DNA, those are what are called non-recombining DNA. Therefore, they should be the most stable. So when they sequenced the chimpanzee Y chromosome, they were shocked. They admitted that this is what we would expect between humans and chickens. Yet this is what we've seen in humans and chimpanzees. So the Y chromosome, if it's 99.9% similar in every single human being on the planet, can you guys answer why is the chimpanzee, who is supposedly our closest cousin, why is it less than 70%?
Well, it's because that humans are all much closely related than a chimp, and just because it's the closest related in the animal kingdom to humans doesn't mean it should be equivalent to the relationship that humans have towards one another. It's like asking why you'd be more genetically similar to your twin or your brother or sister than you are to some person over the other side of the world.
Well, no, my point is the Y chromosome being the most stable, the Y chromosome should be the most similar to humans with the chimpanzee. Chimpanzee and human should share the most with the Y chromosome. Therefore, when they sequenced it, and I'm screen sharing, I'm not sure who has to approve of it. This is the paper. Chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes are remarkably divergent in structure. I'll send you. Oh, like the actual? Yeah, I can send you the paper.
Yeah. Just send me the DOI. I can look it up. That's not a problem.
Because even here's a section from it. More than 30% of the chimp Y chromosome lacks a alignable counterpart on the human Y chromosome, and vice versa. And this is a secular paper, and vice versa. Whereas this is true for less than 2% of the remainder of the genome. So the point is, the bigger question would be then, how can you account for such large differences if humans and chimps only separated from their common ancestor, let's say 6 million years ago? Because if the Y chromosome is so stable, is the point.
Yeah, I don't know that. I'd have to look at the paper to find out.
I'll send it to you. It's definitely an interesting question that I brought up.
And as I said when I came in here, I think Immutable knows way more about biology than I do. I'm not a biologist, so I might not be the best person to answer that question at all.
Well, even Immutable can answer it if he wants. There's the paper, Immutable, if you want to copy it down and read it later.
The DOI. So I didn't really. Unfortunately, I didn't really have a chance to.
That's okay. We can reconvene, no problem. You guys go ahead. I don't want to dominate. I'm also
Yeah,
eating,
no,
so-
I'd love to read it.
Hang on, guys. So Andrew has been on for a long time and hasn't said anything. Andrew, you have anything you want to say, man?
Oh, just quite interesting. It's eye-opening, most of this, which is why I'm generally trying to stay silent. But I thought I'd point out that he tried to say from Deuteronomy, and I can't recall the scriptures, but in one breath he tried to say that it was basically, oh, we see the scientific episode, and I believe Deuteronomy this says it is. And then in the next couple of breaths down the line, he said, actually, no, it doesn't. And he had another scripture to prove that one. So I just thought that was an interesting point. And I don't know if that can turn into a question, but it's just an observation.
So are you talking about the debate between SFT and Dr.
Yeah.
Ron? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he did.
So basically, he said
in
Deuteronomy, and he quoted it, and then he quoted the other scriptures. So I can't remember which way. I only call it Deuteronomy.
Yeah, he bounced back and forth on.
Oh, by the way, scanning. Is the paper you're referencing from 2010? Let's see. From 2010, Hughes, Skaletsky, et al. I believe.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
2010.
I'll look into that. Immediately, like, I'd kind of wonder, because I'm skimming through part of the paper, and honestly, Christopher knows more about this shit than I do. I'd be interested in seeing, like, with this paper, because they mentioned certain genes that are used as a kind of like as a baseline for what they're doing in terms of analysis. I'd kind of be curious to see, like, out of what basis they chose these genes and things like that, and also see if there's any other consequence studies that have been followed up and tried to see if they get the same type of the same kind of numbers in terms of, like, similarity.
Right. No, I think that's a good idea. I think the biggest point too when you're reading it is just to, and I know you understand the fact that the human Y chromosome, like the nuclear DNA, we inherit 2 copies, of course. That's biparentally inherited DNA. The Y chromosome, right? But the Y chromosome is uniparentally inherited DNA. We get it from our father, so it should be more stable. It doesn't undergo any recombination, and if I've heard explanations that because the Y chromosome mutates faster, one of the lineages might have mutated to the point where there is such extreme dissimilarity. But if that occurred in the human line, then we should see some divergent Y chromosomes in some subpopulations within humans. But it just turns out that no matter what group of humans you look at around the world, we all have extremely low variation in our Y chromosome. The uniparentally inherited DNA should be the most stable, would be the point. But yet it's so dissimilar between chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes. In that paper, you'll see them say that they were surprised by this, and this is what they expected between humans and chickens, but yet this is what we found in humans and chimps. But when you read the paper, you'll see that in there.
Yeah, I guess to look into it. I mean, I can imagine that Y chromosome is probably susceptible to like larger mutations that can occur, such as like indels or things like that, which might explain like some of the discrepancies there.
Yeah, it definitely, through high sequencing genomic tests, they now have discovered that the Y chromosome does mutate faster. That's where Dr. Jensen, I screen shared that paper tonight, where he's looked at the high quality sequences and he's determined that there's only been about 4,500 years worth of mutation accumulation. So there is an argument to be had that, it does mutate quicker, but the amount that it has to actually mutate to account for the 70% dissimilarity between humans and chimps, that's where the problem arises, because then we would expect, like I said, some subpopulations on this planet when it comes to humans to have divergent Y chromosomes, but yet they're all incredibly similar would be the point.
So I'll have to look into the paper, but I would want to also kind of wonder about, are there any particular, like, any peculiarities in terms of like how the Y chromosome is influenced by epigenetics, particularly, like if there are mechanisms which prevent or favor like hypermutation in the Y chromosome? And because one of the assumptions that you're going to point out is that evolution can assume linear mutation rates, but that may not necessarily be true. It might well be the case that there are certain epigenetic mechanisms which, when those markers are present on the Y chromosome, prevent it from mutating as quickly as if those markers were not there.
Well, I think the point was made that the Y chromosome among humans hasn't changed very much.
If I was understanding his point correctly, I think it said that it did diverge quite a bit, like that it's more divergent than they thought it was. But I could be misunderstanding.
Well, but among humans, that it's very, very
Yeah,
similar.
no. Yeah, JJ, you're right, brother. Yeah, so the human and chimp, their Y chromosomes are incredibly divergent, less than 70, and plus there's size differences. So when you actually consider all of these factors, it's probably more like 60% dissimilar. But we can just, play it safe and say 70% dissimilar. I'm saying that if the explanation for faster rates of mutation, and by faster rates of mutation, I mean the levels of mutation rate for the Y chromosome to account for the 70% dissimilarity, then we should, like JJ said, we should find divergence within the human species, is my point. Yeah, humans and chimps are divergent in Y chromosome, but we should find divergence within humans as well. But yet, no matter what two humans you pick out on this planet, you're going to find low levels of variation, and you're going to find that they're all 99.9% similar when it comes to the Y chromosome and just in DNA in general, low genetic diversity.
Yeah, I've compared my Y chromosome with other people, with the African races and the Asian races, and they're really quite similar. They're different numbers of copies of the same information.
Well, thanks for the link. I'll have to look into it, but obviously at this point, I'm not able to fully address that point since I'm not well read on it.
Where is CRISPR?